Welcome, everyone. Welcome to round two of the Urban Ag Resilience Award program. Last year, we were able to effectively channel a little over $350,000 of relief to several different institutions. It's something that, on behalf of both of our partners, the American Public Gardens Association and the United States Botanic Garden, we take very seriously, but also with a tremendous amount of pride to be able to offer this program and to have it channel food to folks, but also to further our understanding of the successes and the challenges of urban agriculture, and to share that amongst our public garden world as we continue to make progress in that. So I don't want to tie up too much of the program today. I'll just reiterate a couple things that Bailey said. So today we're here to tell you a little bit about the program, a little bit about its successes, a little bit about criteria, but everything that we hear from you and that we present today is going to be part of that Q&A page that we'll post over the next day or so. So without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Emily and Bailey.
Great. So hi, everyone. Emily from the U.S. Botanic Garden. Thanks for being here today. What we wanted to do is start by sharing a little bit of background on the Urban Ag Resilience Program. As Casey said, now going into its second year. So last year in 2020, the U.S. Botanic Garden partnered with the American Public Gardens Association. We established the program, and the purposes at that time were really grow capacity, prevent shortfalls, and then gather some best practices of established programs that were kind of already going on in the U.S. Public Gardens community. So we put out the call for applicants. They needed to be U.S. public gardens with existing urban agriculture or food growing programs. And we were prioritizing gardens that were facing challenges operating at their full capacity or that had the potential to increase their capacity during the second half of 2020. And that turned out to be a lot of gardens. So we had a really enthusiastic response when we put out last year's call. And as Casey said, we were able to offer those awards. They were $5,000 to $15,000 to 28 public gardens. And those represented 19 states and the District of Columbia. We saw a big range of program types going on. We saw gardens collaborating with community partners to grow and distribute produce. We saw gardens providing in-kind and technical support to community partners and gardeners to promote urban food production. We saw a huge range of approaches to maintaining and expanding urban agriculture and food growing education programs. That was going on in person, that was going on online, all sorts of creative ways. And we saw gardens engaging in providing internships and training opportunities in urban agriculture, both for youth and other community members. So that's kind of what we saw gardens engaging in last year, and we wanted to learn about the impacts of that work. We collected data, we analyzed that data, and that reporting that gardens did, last year's awardees did, really provided us with a great learning opportunity and helped us to kind of understand the landscape and the interests and the possibilities for the future of this program. I wanted to share some of our biggest lessons learned that sort of informed some of the decisions we made about the 2021 program. First was just the great response to the opportunity. We knew we wanted to offer it again if we could. We recognize the importance of partners, right? Collectively, those 28 participating gardens worked with over 80 partners in 2020. So we saw that those partnerships were really an important means of connecting with audiences and resources. We saw lots of gardens engage in food production, lots of gardens engage in education, and we wanted to really support and encourage the integration of those pieces to maximize the impact that urban agriculture programs can have. And then when we collected that end of program reporting, we realized that we were learning so much from gardens, and that it might be great to have gardens have an opportunity to also learn from one another. We will have a session at the APGA virtual conference this year that discusses the 2020 Urban Ag Resilience Program and includes some storytelling from participating gardens. And that sort of piece of gardens sharing their experiences is something that we want to continue going forward in 2021. You can go to the next slide, please. So that kind of brings us to what does the Urban Agriculture Resilience Program look like in 2021? You can find the criteria and all the information we'll go over today on the association's website. This year, we're accepting applications from organizations that are already or plan to partner to facilitate their proposed program. So those eligible programs and projects should be a partnership between a U.S. public garden and then at least one, could be more, other partner organizations, and either entity can submit the application. The applications need to be submitted by just one organization on behalf of the project. And that organization needs to be either the public garden partner or a recognized tax exempt nonprofit organization. The award eligible programs need to combine food growing and education. And we're looking for programs that are serving audiences, especially experiencing food insecurity in urban or metropolitan areas. And we have gotten the question whether applicants and awardees from last year can reapply. The answer to that is yes, they can. Next slide, please. So we said that one of the partners in the project should be a public garden. What do we mean by that? We are following the association's definition of public garden. So you can see it here. You can find it on the association's website. Really, we're talking about institutions that maintain plants for public education enjoyment, in addition to research, conservation, and higher learning. It's got to be open to the public. Resources and accommodations made available to all visitors. Staffed by professionals trained in their given areas of expertise, and they maintain active plant records systems. So when we get questions about what do we mean by public garden, this is where we're pointing people to this definition. Next slide, please. So what are our priorities in 2021? On the application, and Bailey's going to go through the application, we're going to be looking for a few things. We're going to be looking for the extent to which programs are showing us evidence that they're going to creatively utilize or leverage the assets of both the U.S. Public Garden and that partnering organization. And so we're looking at, well, what is it that each organization is really contributing to the collaboration? We're going to be looking for concerted efforts, again, to combine food growing and education. We're looking for programs that facilitate public engagement in urban food growing. So that might be by providing education and technical support, might be providing in-kind resources, growing space that could take a variety of forms. And then we're interested in how the program benefits audiences or participants who are experiencing food insecurity challenges, especially exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So we know we're still in it, and that's an important thing for us to be responsive to still. And so we're going to be asking both about who are the audiences for your program and also about how your program addresses those food security challenges. And then we're just going to kind of look overall at the ability of the applicant to utilize the award to really increase capacity in urban agriculture, both within and beyond the public gardens community. So hopefully that gives a sense of some of the important areas of focus for this year's program. Again, you can find the criteria on the APGA website and review it. And then I'm going to hand things over to Bailey, and she's going to orient you a bit to the application itself.
Hello again, everybody. My name is Bailey, and I work with the American Public Gardens Association. And yeah, we're just going to dive right into an overview of the application process. So on this slide here, you can see there are mostly important dates, and you'll see that the online application forms are due by May 19th. We plan to notify awardees by June 1st, and the funding will be expected to be distributed in mid-June. And you can also see here that there will be final reports. There will also be a midpoint evaluation report, and both of the reports we're going to go over a little bit later on in a later slide. And you can see that the funding range is also between 10 and 20,000. So eligible applicants would ask for funding within that range. And so I'm just going to start with, this is our website. This is the American Public Gardens Association's website. And this is the Urban Agriculture Resilience Program's web page on the website. So when you go to the website, this is what you'd see. And when you scroll down, this is probably what you'll see. And I'm going to just go into a little bit of detail of what some of the important links are here. I'd like to talk about them because they're really important to everybody who's applying, and I will tell you how they can help you with your application. So at the top in the blue rectangle box, you'll see the words complete list of criteria. And that link will take you to the PDF of all of the criteria, which focuses on, like, it'll say what our priorities are, some of the reporting marketing commitments, and also eligibility requirements will all be there in that complete list of criteria. And going down a little bit on the page in the red rectangular box, this was not here the day that the website went live. This was by popular demand. We had a lot of people asking if they could receive a PDF of some of the application questions or of the application instead of having to click through the online form. So we included this here the day after we went live. And I think that would have been like April 20th. And if you click that preview of the application, it will open a PDF that shows every question that's on the application. So you can kind of get an idea of what exactly you're going to be asked and what information you need to know before going into the application. And it does have to be, you do have to apply through the online application form, which you can find by clicking the Apply Now button on the right-hand side. And in the yellow box, you will see the words Public Garden under the key criteria for applicants. And that will bring you to the link that Emily was talking about earlier, a web page that has a brief description of what a public garden is if you need, or if you want to reference that or review that. And closer to the bottom, you will also see in a purple rectangular box the words the budget. And that will, if you click on that, that will download an Excel file to your computer. And it is a fillable budget form. And I will show that a little bit later as well. So what do you need to complete the application? Just want to go over this a little bit. I'm not going to go over every question that's in the application. I'm just going to kind of give a brief overview of some of the things that you should make sure you have before you start filling it out, to be a little bit helpful. And you'll see, this is the page that you'll see when you open the application. When you click that little Apply Now button, you will see most of the information I've already detailed in the overview slide a couple of slides ago. But you'll also see a link to the criteria PDF as well as the PDF of the preview of application questions. And so some of the things that you'll need are, you'll need to already have your partner organizations, and you'll need to know who the program leads at your organization and the partner organizations are going to be. You'll need to have all of their contact information and be able to provide that in the application when you submit it. You'll also be asked a few other questions, such as, is one of the partners a public garden? And then let's see, I'll continue on to a couple other questions. You will also have to state exactly how much money you are requesting. So it's important to already have your budget filled out before starting to work on the application, so that you know the number that is already in your planned budget. And we'll also be asking if it's a new or existing program, or if it's a new or existing partnership. And after those questions, you'll be then led to some of the more descriptive open-ended questions. And I'm not showing all of them here. There are more than just these two, but that's really your place to showcase what some of the goals and really describe what your program is wanting to accomplish. And this is the very end of the application. So this is the area where you're going to have to upload a couple of files and then complete the application. So you will need to submit and upload the Excel budget form, and which I will show in the next slide and talk a little bit about. And you'll also need to upload a document signed by Chief Executive Administrators of all partners, documenting the commitment to the partnership, or some sort of proof of the partnership. So this could be a letter of intent or a memorandum of agreement or understanding, and that would need to be signed by all partners in the partnership. And then the very last question on the application is just to affirm that you are authorized to submit the proposal on behalf of your organization and all of the partner organizations, and that you agreed to all of the program criteria. And after you affirm that and click the arrow at the bottom, your application will be submitted. So this is what the budget Excel will look like. This is a screenshot of it when you download it. And you'll see here that the white cells are the cells that you will be filling in your budget. And so on the farthest left-hand side, on the column on the farthest left-hand side, you will see some budget categories. And the column next to that is where the applicant organization will fill out their expenses. In the column to the right of that is where the partner organization's expenses all together will be. So it is just one column for all partners, even if you have more than one. And at the very right-hand side will be the brief descriptions or item descriptions for your budget. And so a couple of those have some specifications. You can see in fringe benefits and indirect costs that there are some percent limits. And we also just want some very brief descriptions on any items that you include in your budget. At the very bottom, you'll see some submission instructions, which are pretty simple, but just there to remind you to download this document, and then you will review the criteria for participation, which that is a link to the PDF that we've been talking about, and edit this document to include your project budget, and then you're able to upload it into the application at the end. And that is everything for an overview of the application. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Emily, who's going to talk a little bit about the reporting and marketing.
Thanks, Bailey. Yeah, so Bailey talked a little bit about what to expect during the application process. And so I wanted to provide a little information about what you would be asked to do once awarded. The first thing is that we want to be able to keep learning from all the work that you're doing. So we will have a reporting requirement. Last year, we did have just an end of program survey that people filled out, and people sent us some budget information. We will do that again, and we will provide those tools. And we're going to be asking for that to be completed by February 1st. In addition, Bailey mentioned that we're adding this, what we're calling the mid-award check-in. So we may ask you to complete a brief survey or participate in a phone conversation with us just to share how your program is going, sort of at the midpoint. So that would be happening by October 31st. In terms of what you would need to be tracking during the program, we're going to be asking for some quantitative information, some participation numbers, pounds of food, those might be examples. We're also going to be asking for some qualitative information at the end of the program, your reflections, your lessons learned, those sorts of things. Next slide, please. The next thing to note is that we would like to be able to communicate about what awardees are doing. And the USBG and the association are going to request photographs from your program activities and marketing materials or other outreach communications from your programs. And so we would just ask that awardees agree to allow us to communicate about your programs and to use those provided photographs and application responses for our communications about the Urban Ag Resilience Program. You may also want to communicate about what you're doing as part of the program. And so we do have a few requests from our communications teams for when you do that. We're going to ask that you refer to this award as an award and not as a grant. You may be asked to publicly share some results and lessons learned from your Urban Agriculture Resilience Program participation, going back to that element of gardens and organizations learning from each other. We ask that all publicity and products be co-branded and acknowledge both the U.S. Botanic Garden and the association as partners. You will be provided with a press release template. If you choose to communicate about receiving the award, we ask that you use that template to do so. And then if you're creating other materials, things like print materials that reference the award, we would ask to review those materials before they're finalized. If you're not sure if we need to see it, I would say don't hesitate to ask and we can let you know. And I think that covers everything in terms of our reporting and marketing guidelines. So hand it back over to Bailey. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. Yeah, so if there are any questions that you've come up with after this webinar, feel free to reach out to info@publicgardens.org. And these slides, as well as a new Q&A page, and that'll feature some frequently asked questions that anybody could find beneficial. And this webinar session recording will all be available later this week on the association's website. And there's the link for the webpage here. It'll be in these slides, and we've restated a couple of the key dates down here at the bottom. So thank you everyone for attending. And I don't know if Ray or Casey, if there were any questions you saw in the Q&A that you think would be beneficial for us to talk about for everybody.
The one question that that might be of interest, I think other people may have this answer, is if the majority of partner organization expenses toward the project is in kind, do we want that to be included in the project budget? And I answered that we're not asking for cost sharing in this, so I thought that we probably did not need that, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I would answer that in similar fashion. The award is a direct award, and we're trying to track how the money is used. It's not a partner in-kind cost share type of arrangement. I think it's great to point that out in your narrative so that there's clarification, but the budget requirements are how the money would flow to each organization.
Thank you, Casey. Another question is from a university garden, and can a partner or can our partner be another entity, e.g. a student food pantry within the university if you are in a university affiliated garden? And my thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if it's a separate entity, even if it's within the university system, then yes, that could be your partner.
And I would concur with Ray's assessment on that. I think what you want to do is the letter of intent becomes the deciding factor. And we need a letter of intent that shows that there are two leaders of two different organizations that are intending to partner together. So if it wound up being the same signature from the same organization within that university signing that letter, it's a little awkward. But as long as it's two distinct entities, I think that shows partnership.
Another question is it okay if the total award funding only goes to one of the partners? And the answer is yes. If the way the partnership is set up, where one partner is doing a good bit of the work and they're paying the expenses, and the other partner, say, is an education program, or say owns the land and you're using that land, then yes, that having one partner get the funding is fine. You should spell that out, in the type of partnership you have.
And we're just encouraging you to be innovative. So we're not judging how much money is flowing to any one partner within that. There's no requirement to keep it exactly 50-50 because every circumstance is unique.
Another question is, can stipends for volunteers be included in the budget? Casey, I'm going to let you answer that, but my thought is that if they're being paid, they're not volunteers. But I know that staff time can be included. Staff, can be included in the budget.
Yeah, that's correct. Volunteers can't be paid, but staff time to manage volunteers is certainly an example of a salary cost.
Casey, there's a question about clarification of fringe benefits, and if you refer to taxes, insurance, and the limit being 15%, could you answer, go into a little bit more detail on the fringe benefits that applicants need to or required to report?
Yeah, I think we do a fairly decent job of outlining that in the budget document itself. We know that there are certain entities that have negotiated a higher rate than a 15% rate for fringe, say for HR or insurance benefits or other things. In order to have a level playing field, we cap that at 15%.
There's another question. Do we think that it enhances the application to include more than one garden as a partner organization, or might that seem to lack focus and specificity? And I think, it's all about what you're bringing, what you're applying for. We certainly think that there are many partnerships that are more than two partners, and you can certainly apply that way. And we're trying to lay out all the criteria and things that we'll be looking at and giving those to the potential applicants versus telling you what to do.
We love your questions, so feel free to put your questions in Q&A if you have more questions. While you're formulating your thoughts, we're just going to reiterate what's here on the screen in terms of the key dates and timelines. So the applications are due 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific on May the 19th, 2021. There's a wonderful compliment from someone saying we did a great job explaining things, but more, and that's wonderful. But there was another question about, does receiving the grant last year make you more or less competitive this year? The answer is no.
There's a question of, in the application process, is there a way to include photos to enhance the application, or we'll be asking for those later? And Bailey, you'll have to answer that because I don't know the capability of the online application submission form, but my memory is that photographs are asked for later, not as a...
That's correct.
Okay.
There's another question. Is this a government pass-through grant? And the answer is definitely not. This is not a grant in any way. The U.S. Botanic Garden has cooperative agreement authority, and we work with partners. Often there's money involved, but it is not a grant.
And I'd follow up from that by saying this is a partnership between the two enterprises. And so because we are a 501c3 nonprofit, it's important to us and actually to the greater benefit of understanding urban agriculture as a whole, to have a good idea of how the funds were used and utilized, and to be able to track that and to use it for our own reporting purposes. I'm going to follow up on Allison's question. I was a little bit low key in my answer. Receiving the award last year does not make you more competitive or less competitive this year. We're not weighting the awards that way. Again, we're looking for partnerships, we're looking for education, and that combination of education and the ability to provide food and the ability to share knowledge, those are all the three criteria, if you will, that are the primary criteria that we're looking for as we're analyzing applicants.
There's a question, is food security the only issue to be addressed, or do you also accept outcomes like mental health, building community? Emily, I'd like you to step in on this, but I will say that one of the goals is the partnership and education around growing food, and food insecurity was just one of the things we mentioned. But Emily, do you want to speak to this question?
Sure. Yeah, I think other outcomes like mental health, building community are excellent. I would say that our focus is audiences who are experiencing food insecurity are benefiting from this program in some way, and that your program does integrate the education and the food production or food growing pieces in some way. So we recognize and celebrate that there may be other outcomes beyond that. But I think when we talk about the food security piece, we're really thinking about audience and who's benefiting from this program.
Emily, there's also a question that you might want to answer about, will the reporting requirements be listed on the website? I think some of them are now, but you may want to talk about the reporting a little bit more.
Yeah, what we did last year and what I imagine we would do this year is that once awarded, we send out sort of a what to expect in terms of reporting, because we know that there are certain things, like pounds of food produced, things like that, that you would need to be tracking. So you would need to know upfront. So once awarded, we would send out an email to all awardees that detailed those reporting requirements and kind of let you know upfront what sorts of things you should be monitoring throughout your program participation.
And just as with the way that we've structured the application and the criteria this year, we would be extremely straightforward with that, with the reporting requirements. And one of the things that makes this partnership very strong is that we know and understand the challenges that you all face in urban agriculture. And so every effort is going to be made to minimize the burden and maximize the utility of information that we would be asking for reporting requirements.
There's another one. Do social media post videos on YouTube count as education, or do you need in-person live or synchronous online programs? Social media post would not necessarily be educational. If you do a YouTube class or a Facebook Live educational program, that certainly would count. Obviously, in-person education right now may not be the best way to engage people, and we understand that. But simply posting about your partnership online is a social media post, or a video of staff working or volunteers working, that's not necessarily considered educational.
I'd reiterate that I think it's great to use creativity and ingenuity and innovation to try to solve challenges. But I do think that there's a continuum there. Merely just making it an Instagram post is not really educational in and of itself. So, and then I think we had another question just about the review criteria and how much the budget is taken in consideration when reviewing. We've done a very, I think, stringent job displaying the criteria and what's expected in the criteria right now. So it is what it is. And then in terms of the budget, within that budget range that's offered in that award, budget is not the primary consideration and the primary driver. I think there's a wonderful question from Janine Jensen. I'm going to let the USBG folks or Bailey answer that about audiences and different separation in terms of audiences.
Emily, do you see that question? She was curious if the audience experiencing food insecurity has to be the audience that is receiving food and the education. At her garden or her organization, the educational programs don't reach the same audience that the food reaches.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say that we recognize that programs may have multiple audiences and the work that you're doing may reach multiple audiences. The important thing is that those pieces of the education and the food growing are integrated in some way. So it's not we have our kitchen garden over here and we donate the food from that, and then entirely separate we do some online programming about food growing. We want to see those pieces brought together, and how you do that could happen in many, many ways, and they could reach different audiences.
Question from an anonymous attendee: are recipes that are provided with produce at a food pantry considered education resources? So I'm I'm pausing to let my USBG partners go first.
It would certainly be considered an educational resource. I don't think it would necessarily qualify as an educational program or the education that we're looking for.
Yeah, I would concur. Emily, did you have anything, or Bailey, did you have anything in addition to that?
I would say it feels maybe a little bit passive. If you could share information about how those are getting used, or if there's an education, if there's any sort of education around how to use the recipes.
I think if you were doing,
aside from just inserting it in the box, there was a little more to it.
if you were doing cooking demonstrations using produce out of the garden and talking to people about how to use fresh produce that they are growing, then that, and provide the recipe that way, that is more of an educational aspect. But just providing the recipe would not be, as Emily said.
Yeah, I would say too, just as one social media post is not truly indicative of an entire educational curricula. That, say, a series of live stream Instagram live events might be around a central topic about food security or urban agriculture. The minimalist in me goes and says, well, if you just have one recipe card that's just the recipe, that doesn't necessarily convey education. But if it's coupled with nutrition information, or coupled with cultural heritage information, or coupled with information about why this particular dish is important in some other way, shape, or form, or as Ray or Emily mentioned, is coupled with some sort of greater thing in another way, that shows a difference.
Well, if there are not any more questions, we'll wait another minute or two, but remember, we'll post all the questions that were asked today and the answers on the website later this week, along with the slides from today. And if a question comes up that has not been answered yet, please look at the Q&A page on the website first. And if you don't see an answer to it there, you can always ask that question via info@publicgardens.org.
And just a side note on that, we're channeling all of your questions to info@publicgardens.org. If we do not answer your question, please don't take offense. It's generally because it probably is something that we would either post up on that Q&A page that we have, so that all applicants have a chance to hear and understand the answer.
There's one more question. Several of our partners are small community-based groups, not 501c3s, and do not have paid staff. Can we do an intern stipend? The award to awardees can go to paid staff, so that would include interns. If you are partnering with a community-based organization that does not have paid staff, then engaging interns and having an educational component to that would probably be a way to look at education and helping staff the partnership.
Yeah, I have to admit a tiny bit of confusion from the question, but I'll answer it this way. So one of the organization that's a partnered organization has to be an organization that's capable of receiving funds. So either the Public Garden partner or the other organization has to be capable of receiving funds, either being a 501c or having an employer identification number, so that we have a place to document that those funds were directed to. If the question is more about, can we pay, say, garden staff to partner with this organization that does not have its own financial resources, as long as there's a documented agreement between the leaders of the two entities, that's okay, but the funds are going only to one place. And then those funds need to be dispersed from that one location. So hopefully that clarifies.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, I think that is all we have planned for the Q&A webinar today. And thank you everybody for attending. This has been great. And just to reiterate, this webinar was recorded and will also be posted along with the other things we've mentioned before, the Q&A webpage and slides. So that will be going up later this week.